What's up, everybody? This is Eric from GB Games, and this is another edition of Dracanea Vlogs, in which we go behind the scenes and give you a little sneak peek at just the background development of our upcoming video game, Dracanea, the Ragtag Regalia. So in past episodes, we focused more on the programming side of things, working in Unity. We've done one other episode in Photoshop, but so today we are going to actually be back in Photoshop because we are going to be working on the UI today. So, as any programmer could tell you, programming eventually turns into a slog. It gets, you sort of get into the weeds and fall into a little bit of a rut, and that's where we've been in development lately, is just plowing through the story slowly and steadily, programming the actual plot progression and just, the story of the game, the meat and bones of the game. So to change things up, going to be focusing on the UI today, specifically working on the main menu itself. So as you can see here, we're working in Photoshop, and this is actually just a PSD at the moment because this is just for diagram purposes. At the moment, this is where we're currently at in actual, in engine. And as you can see, this is all pretty blank, which is why we're working on the UI, so we can start adding menus and stuff here. So, back to Photoshop. If you pay attention, like I said, this is just a PSD, but all very placeholdery. Like, we even got like a beta old portrait of Riker here that is very, very old, and obviously not something we would use in-game. What we're trying to do is just sort of suss out what needs to go on this main menu. Because going back to the screen cap from in-game, again, this is all very placeholdery, so you can see a lot of just like plain boxes, stuff's not aligned properly, but we're going to take a look at just this initial main page, like the landing page for the main menu. Because obviously when you're playing a game, or you're developing a game in this case, when the player presses start or X or tab or escape or what have you, you want certain information just like at the ready to go, to be delivered to the player to kind of explain, like, here you go, like, this is what we're doing. So, for starters, one thing you really, like, a really important information players need to know is their just next location or the next destination. So, because, maybe you fall asleep and you wake up and you're like, where the hell am I going? Or maybe you just haven't played in 3 months. So, in this case, it helps you out to just sort of suss out where you're supposed to be headed in the actual world of Dracanea. So, probably it's going to be something along, we'll go with, like, next stop, or next destination. I'll say next stop. And that's probably would be, I don't know if it would be a text box. I don't know, probably not necessarily. You would probably just go text. Blah, and yada yada yada. So it's a little big, so probably need to resize that. Keep that up there. What we'll actually do, convert that into, or not convert, we will place box here. Just not that it necessarily needs to be surrounded by a box, but by doing so, we can at least have a layout of what each UI section of the main menu is going to actually, the dimensions, the placement. So let's copy and paste this layer over, and we will get the paint bucket tool. All right, so just for placeholder purposes, let's get this on top there. So just for the sake of argument, just for the sake of example. So this is kind of big, honestly, so we could probably size this a bit. Fit up in the corner and have it be a little bit framed better. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. This is obviously going to need to be long enough for, it's gonna have to accommodate for any long names or long destinations, titles. So let's go with, okay, I think there's a section in the game that is called Mount Pyrox Penal Center. I know, get the giggles out. I said penal center, but it's an abandoned prison built into the side of a volcano. So, yay, torture. So let's start off with that, because that's pretty lengthy. So let's change this to 30, and we'll give it flag font. Alright, we're gonna have to change that size. Mount Pyrox Penal Center. And that's probably gonna need to be 60. That's about right. So just for oh, you know what? We alright. So we actually left out the word center here. Oh no, we didn't leave out the word center, it was just out of frame. Okay, fair enough. You win this round, Photoshop. So that's, honestly, off the top of my head, that's probably one of the longest titles or names of places. So actually, let's extend this out. And we'll align this to the right. Next stop. Blah, blah, blah. Now again, let's frame this so that this looks nice. I'm not using the handwritten version anymore, so we will nuke that right now. And for this thing, this box, just for the dimensions, let's change this so that it fits that better. And honestly, you know what? Not that this frame won't be visible in Engine. We'll extend it all the way out there, just again, to get an idea of the dimensions. So that way we can import that into Unity later and just know exactly how long that's going to need to be. So what are the actual dimensions of it? 1193 by 94. Can we make that a nice round number? Can we make that... Can we make it 1200 perhaps? 1203, 1201 by 92, 1199. Let's bump that up. Let's do 100.6%, so 1200. Increases up to 90. So 1200 by 90. That's about what the UI box is going to be in practice. Alright, and again, it's not actually going to be a box in Engine, but we'll use that just to know what the drawing dimensions will be in Unity's canvas. Okay, so that's gonna be pretty good, because like without the actual box, you'll just have text, and again, it's not just gonna be the most generic crappy text on the planet, thanks to TextMesh Pro. So, okay. So we don't need that. Put that down, and that, yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So, we'll get rid of that box for now. We'll rename it to Destination Box. We'll leave that for the time being. So now back to our diagram, our sketching. And so we're going to need an options menu somewhere, because there's nowhere else really to tuck that into the game, so we're probably... Let's see. Bump the smoothing just a little bit. So, options... This will be a button. Now, where would this best be tucked down? Bottom left, bottom right, tricky. So we'll tuck it in the bottom left for the time being. It's a little small, it doesn't need to be gigantic because it's an options button. Like, the options menu doesn't need to be super in your face, but it needs to be there somewhere. So let's give that one another box. So we'll make another menu, or not another layer, options, and we'll give that same layer style. And we will give this a button. So, because, there we go, 270 by 100. Doesn't have to be perfect little round, it doesn't have to be perfect round numbers, but I just like to keep it as round numbers. I feel like it's easier to work with, easier to at least, you know, just remember them when you're putting them into Unity later on. So there's that. This can be framed a little better. So let's add that. Alright. So get rid of the text there. And destination box, that's up there. What we're going to do, we're going to combine the destination box into a group just to clean things up. So the options button. Do text over this. Options. It's going to be centered because it's centered, obviously, since it's going to be a button. And the same thing. These will go into a group. Easy access. Okay. Now that may actually end up being a button, like a visible button later on. We'll figure that out once we get into Unity at a later time and actually start putting this on the Unity canvas. So next up that we need to kind of figure out is one important part of the story, obviously, is Riker and the heroes are going to be looking for the sages that are descended from like the kings and queens of Dracanea when it was in its ancient kingdom time. So that's a big part of the story, and what would an RPG be without just some sort of collectible or thing or some sort of traffic that you're something you're keeping track of. So let's make a box here for the sprites that we're going to use just as placeholders. But in the meantime, let's go to our sprite folder off screen and we'll just pull in a random NPC. Let's see, let's get chick number 1. Here we go. So we will come in here, paste her in, and right, she's actually kind of small, which is perfect, honestly. Don't need that anymore. And okay, good. So in practice, these could actually potentially be a little bigger. So they're going to need to fit 10 sprites. Actually, it may even be too small. So let's see what happens. We're going to duplicate her. This little placeholder. We'll duplicate her. 1, 2, 3. Let's see. Let's keep this uniform. So we'll do 40. Alright, so 40, 40, 40. Come on. Hey, let's zoom in and make it easier on ourselves. 40. Sheesh. Okay. I got 5. Let's duplicate this. We'll account for 10. Just so we can come up with. Okay. So that's about the size we're going to need to fit. But they do look very, very small. Let's try that in full screen. Zoom in a bit just for the sake of eyeballing this. Alright, so yeah, that is a little bit tiny. So let's see, we'll increase these a little bit. That looks a little bit better. Again, they don't need to be super huge or take up a ton of screen. But just enough so that the player can keep track of them. This would probably be a transparent box, so let's see here. Oops. That is not, that brushstroke is not going to be visible because they don't have it on the right layer. Okay. Alright, so where were we? Okay. Not really sure what kind of text we'll use. It's just in the meantime, sages collected. So just again, for the sake of eyeballing this and just to get dimensions, gonna need something about this big. So 620 by, can we make it 220? Oh, there we go. Now then, let's make another placeholder box. We'll get the paste the layer style in. Okay. Alright, that's not bad. Let us... Let's see. Yeah, let's make that into a group 2. We'll call that Sages. So now we can at least move all this stuff around. So right now... So this, honestly, looks a little bit small in the grand scheme of things. We could make this to be a bit bigger. So let's crank that up to 750. I'll do 749. Leave it about there for the time being. So we got that. So we kind of got a little bit going right now. This could potentially be centered. This could also be maybe in the bottom here. And I'm not sure how I like the way that looks. Let's see. This could even be down here in the bottom. If we did that, we could increase it to be larger. It would frame better, but again, this is supposed to be like tracking your progress in the story, so it seems kind of weird to tuck this all the way at the bottom here, with the same area that options is being relegated to. So we're probably better off keeping it over here, but then. Okay, let's keep this same aspect ratio. I think that's good size. Okay. So, now we still have a little, we don't have to fill all this space up, especially once you are kind of, let's see, back to this later. Once in Engine, when you select your party characters over here, it will bring up a menu on this side, which sort of gives you the ability to check out their friendship levels, it lets you check their status, stuff like that. So we don't need to cover this up necessarily. Stuff could be there, but it doesn't have to be covered up. Now I wonder... Yeah, so and then another thing we should probably stick in here that can go alongside options, maybe a sort of... A lot of games don't really have obviously games don't have manuals anymore, so a lot of them do like the digital manual thing. So what we're probably gonna end up doing for Dracanea is like not an in-game manual, but maybe just something that sort of gives you the basic rundown of what you're doing, the buttons, that sort of stuff. Things you would kind of find in a manual, but just in lieu of actual manuals anymore. We'll do this, and then this could say guidebook. We'll figure that out at a later date. So now this space is filling up pretty well. So let us, just for visualizing this, let's turn off the box. Now, I almost wonder if pulling the destination down here would work better if we put these sages up the top. A little tricky, because it seems a little odd to have this void down here unless you track it down there. Not sure how I feel about that. Maybe because the sages, maybe if you make this a bit bigger, it might help to make that fit in. Let's see. Then that takes up a lot if you were to... I mean, if you do this, it does fill the space pretty nicely. And again, as mentioned before, when you're in the actual in-engine screen, if you go to select your characters, check on them, you will have like a box here, but that would overlay over here. So this actually doesn't look terrible per se, but then I almost feel like, the sages are better off being down here, and the destination remains at the top. Actually, if we were to do that, that's not a bad idea, because that does give some room to add more in, like more information. So say, for example, we wanted to say one quality of life feature we're actually planning on adding is it'll be something along the lines of an estimate of what your current like plot beat is at, like an estimate of like how much time that's going to be. So you could probably say, ETA. Well, that's too big, honestly. But just an idea, because we've all been there. You're playing a game, and you're just like, let me just get to the next area. Let me just get to the next thing, and it'll tell you, this feature will be like, hey, just as a heads up, you're going to this like dungeon next, or no, you're in this dungeon now. Dungeon's gonna be about like probably 30 to 40 minutes of your time, and then that way it gives you an idea like, oh, you know what, I'm not gonna get involved in this now. So I think this looks good actually, because then we could put the ETA and any other info up here, something along the lines of that, and then it does give room for, we could possibly just make this a little smaller, obviously, because this is all big, but then that also gives room for, information like your money, stuff like, like collectibles in the area you're in right now. I think that actually, that's not a bad idea. I think we're going to do something like this. So we do that, and then we do have a lot of real estate down here, which we could then figure out at a later date. But this is actually looking pretty good so far. I think this is it's probably how we'll end up going. But you know what? Down the line, when you're playing the game, if the main menu looks completely different from this, then it didn't work out. And you can go, oh, but I saw when it was in its beta state. I saw the design of it. At least you could kind of figure out what was going on and behind the UI design process. And this way, it just sort of gives you, like we try to do with these videos, it just gives you a little bit of a sneak peek behind the scenes into the actual game design aspect of it, and just sort of things you want to convey to the player, and what game design actually is. So in this case, focusing on the UI kind of gives you an idea, like here's all of the important stuff a player needs to know on the fly. So I think we'll leave it at that, and we'll continue on this at a later date, but I think this all looks pretty good so far. We can actually... what if, instead of finalizing this, we just import this directly into Unity, and it just looks like this? If only it were that easy. Anyway, thank you for stopping by and giving a listen, and if you haven't, you can visit us at Dracanea.com to check out any updates on the game. If you're new to this channel, and you like hearing me drone on and on about game design, then feel free to like, and please give us a subscription. It'll help you to stay in touch and keep tabs on the game as we get further progress. At the moment, Still not entirely sure on when we'll have a concrete release date, but we'll keep you updated as that progresses and we get a better idea. So again, thanks for listening and have a great day.